Welcome back to another UFC breakdown video. But before we get into breaking down the fights this weekend, we've got some far more important things to talk about and something that I need your help with. So as you can see in the background here, I have got a petition on the official UK government website. And whenever someone comes to me and asks me to fill out a petition, it's one of those things that I always feel is a bit of a waste of time, because the person that wants you to complete the petition always has good intentions, right? They've got this big problem that they're passionate about, that they want to fix, and if they fix it, it'll make the world a better place. But I've always felt that petitions are one of these things that even when you fill them out, whoever they go to, they're not going to be taken seriously. The person's just going to look at the petition, give some basic, generic, standard response, scrumple the bit of paper up, throw it in the bin, and forget about it, and nothing ever gets changed or improved. The problem never gets fixed. So petitions are one of these things that I've always felt are a bit of a waste of time, but at the end of the day, if you're not trying to fix a problem, then you're a part of the problem, right? You're just ignoring it, you're allowing it to continue. So I want to give a big shout out to a guy called Canberry, who is a YouTuber in the UK, and he's a professional gambler, and most of his content is around how the betting industry, the gambling industry, betting sites are dirty, and they overwhelmingly rig the game in their favor to make it extremely difficult for you to profit. Because even when you are a professional gambler that has an edge, you can place bets, you can be profitable over the long term. They use all kinds of dirty tricks like closing your account, significantly restricting how much you can bet, making it difficult to withdraw your money, that kind of thing. So go subscribe to Canberry, because he is doing the Lord's work by bringing important issues to our attention, like the fact that betting sites are, somehow getting away with absolute murder, running a business model which I strongly believe should be illegal. So if you're not aware, betting sites around the world shut down profitable gamblers. So once you start to consistently make money on a betting account, the betting site will eventually have enough and shut you down. And it would blow your mind how quickly some betting sites will close your account. I've had betting accounts closed before I've even had a chance to place a bet, because the machine learning, the AI that betting site uses, will be able to determine from other databases, maybe they've got information from other betting sites, or I've had accounts closed there, that I am likely to cost them money, so they will shut my account down before I place a bet, to the extent where even my partner, my other half, Joe, she has had a betting account closed before she even had a chance to place a bet, because they associated her with me, which is kind of crazy. And a couple of years ago, the UK government brought in legislation that basically gave betting sites even more power to abuse, in an effort to stop or to try and in an effort to try and protect people that became addicted to gambling. The UK government basically gave betting websites the power to do affordability checks, to determine whether someone could afford to gamble, how much they could afford to lose, and they would put measures in place to theoretically stop people from gambling more than they could afford to lose, which of course sounds like an amazing thing, right? It is great. But the problem is, what the bookies and betting sites have done is abuse this power by using their ability to request quite invasive financial documentation from people to identify whether they're likely to be profitable or not. So the way it currently works is, if you open a betting account in the UK, you have to be able to afford how much you can basically gamble with. So if you're a professional gambler and you go to open a betting site in the UK, the betting site will say you need to send us either your pay slips, your tax returns, and your bank statements as proof of income and proof of where your funds came from. So if you're a professional gambler that is moving money around all over the place, maybe you'll deposit £5,000 into a betting account, make 10 grand, make the withdrawal. Say you're say you're someone who has had an account closed on a different betting site, right? The government have given the power to these betting sites to obtain this financial documentation from you before you can open a betting account and use that against you. So if it shows on your bank statements that you're profitable on other betting sites, they're not going to let you open up an account. On top of that, betting sites have started sharing like information between themselves. So if I open up an account with, say, William Hill, for example, and I make a few $1,000s profit and then they shut me down, William Hill will then share that information with all other betting sites, and then before I even have a chance to place a bet, they'll shut me down because they know I've been profitable elsewhere. So in the UK, the way that the government works, the way Parliament works, is if you get 10,000 signatures on a petition on the official government website, government are forced to basically respond to whatever the petition is about. If you get 100,000 signatures, the UK government are forced to debate the topic in government, and you'll actually see video footage of politicians discussing the matter. So what this petition is basically a petition to try and get betting sites in the UK to stop abusing the power the government have given them in requesting invasive financial information to determine how much someone can afford to lose. Because I think what's happened here is the UK government have gone into this with the best of intentions. I've gone a bit blurry, apologies. There we go. I think the UK government have done this with the best of intentions. They've given betting sites the power to do this in order to try and protect people who are addicted to gambling, to protect them from losing. And that's a great idea. That's a great initiative that I'm all for. But I think the problem here is betting sites have then abused that power and used it against people that are profitable, who obviously, don't need to be protected. So it's pretty dirty, man. So I'd appreciate it if you would help us get the numbers up on this petition. I'll leave a link for this in the description below. I'll keep mentioning this in the videos as well, just to try and get as many signatures as we can. I would love to see the UK government debate this issue in Parliament. So if we get to 100,000, I mean, you can see it creeping up, but just while we're doing the video, if we get to 100,000, that would be absolutely phenomenal. And for anyone that doesn't know what I'm talking about, I've got some videos on my YouTube channel. You can watch them here, where basically I show like video footage of having betting accounts closed for being profitable. And this is something that it is very important. It is very important to me. It's something I feel very strongly about, because I've developed a skill where I should be a millionaire. I should have been a millionaire a very, very long time ago. I should not even be doing this video. I should be one of those cringy motherfuckers in a Gucci tracksuit and a Rolex watch and a fake tan in a hotel room talking about fucking, mental health and fucking how it's important to work hard and, all this shit. Fucking getting the cheeky Rolex on the Instagram post. I should be one of those cringeworthy motherfuckers. Anyway, I would never be like that, but I'm just joking. But anyway, yeah, I should have been a millionaire very, very long time ago, because as you can see here, I do have a big edge when it comes to live betting on the UFC. See this profitability chart, pretty much non-stop profit. Over the last 8 years, I've barely had a losing quarter. So I perform really well live betting the UFC, but I can't make millions from this skill. I can't become financially free, because as soon as you make a few $1,000s profit, the betting sites shut you down. So this is a topic that is particularly hits particularly close to home, because my life would be a lot better. My life would be a lot easier if betting sites didn't work so hard to stop professional gamblers, profitable players from earning money, and they play a dirty game, man. So yeah, go watch these videos on my YouTube channel if you don't know what I'm talking about, and it'll make a lot more sense. Because yeah, I am quite resentful of him, man. I mean, for the longest time I was resentful, for the longest time I was resentful about the fact that I should be a millionaire, and I'm not going to be, because betting sites play a dirty game. But then, maybe 2.5, 3 years ago, I just got to the point where I kind of accepted that it wouldn't change, and instead I just tried starting to develop new skills to kind of replace betting on UFC, because I know that so long as betting sites are allowed to shut down profitable players, I'm not going to be able to achieve my financial goals, which is really, really frustrating, to have this skill that you can't use to its full potential. That's why you see me starting to, bet football, trying to be profitable live betting football. Why you see me talking a lot about Bitcoin and crypto and trying to trade that, just because it's demoralizing to have a skill that you can't, make the most of. Really frustrating. So please sign the petition. I'll leave it just below. It would mean a lot. More we can get any of the better. Shout out to the man, Cam Berry. His content's brilliant. Go subscribe to him. You're going to like him a lot. If you like my videos, you like him a lot. So go check out Cam Berry, man. He is a legend. So yeah, I guess one more thing we should talk about is crypto, the dreaded crypto. Some people love it, some people hate it. But what I'm going to do, like periodically, maybe like once every few videos, when it needs to be brought up again, I'm just going to keep mentioning crypto just to keep it in people's minds, because I think the problem with crypto is, and the reason why it turns a lot of people off, the reason why a lot of people don't like hear about it or talk about it, is because most people get burned, right? Most people get scammed. Most people lose a lot of money. And I've been, balls deep in crypto since 2016, 2017. So I've been through it all. I've been rug pulled. I've been scammed. I've had money stolen from me. I've been dumped on. I've held fucking worthless Ponzi tokens all the way down in a bear market. I've been through 3 crypto cycles. I've seen it all. I've been burned in every single way imaginable. So I know how painful it is. I know how it feels. But I also feel like I have kind of figured it out as well. So not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not telling you what to do. All I'm doing in these videos is just sharing my own opinions and trying to keep what's happening in your mind, because I think a lot of the problem with crypto is where it goes through these boom and bust cycles. People, or most people, arrived at the party too late, when the party's been raging for a while and everyone's made loads of money and the lights are ready to come on, everyone's about to go home, and that's where people lose. And then they don't pay attention to what's happening during the quiet periods. And then all of a sudden, they hear another amazing party down the street. The music's blasting, everyone's drunk, having fun. They go down the street to the party, but again, by the time they get to the party, the lights are coming on, the party's over, and everyone's going home. And that's a cycle that plays out over and over again. So again, I'm not telling you what to do. This is not financial advice, but I am going to keep mentioning this in my videos because I do care about people. I want to see people do well in life. I want to see people succeed. And I do think there are opportunities coming up, and just by keeping it in the forefront of people's minds, maybe I can help some people do good things. So very quickly, I'll just show you what I feel is up, because crypto obviously tanking right now. Altcoins getting decimated. Everyone's lost their ass on frog tokens. But let's just pay attention to what is up right now. So in the last video, we talked about the halvening. Definitely worth going out and researching the halvening. The halvening is an event that takes place every few years, and after every halvening, and often in the run-up to every halvening, you see crypto go on this massive bull run, right? So the blue vertical lines here represent the halvening dates, which I've drawn out on this chart. So as you can see, in the halvening back in July 2016, we see price grind up, and then after the halvening date, huge bull run. And we've all heard stories about people that turned $1 into millions of dollars back in this time. That's obviously an exaggeration, but we all know people that got into crypto back in the ICO days, the Bitcoin fork days of 2016, started with a little bit of money and ended with a lot, done really well. And then we've got the next halvening date in May 2020. As you can see, price grinds up, but on the halvening date, boom, another huge bull market. And this bull market, how did people make bank in this one? It was the Shiba Inu, meme coin run. It was the NFT boom, Bored Apes, all that kind of stuff. So the next halvening is in May 2024, which is 1 year from now. So that's going to be, obviously, if we get another line out, Vertical line. It's going to be May, sometime in May. We don't know the exact date. So as you can see, in the bigger picture, we're getting very, very close. And we've seen what happens after previous halvenings. Huge bull run. Huge bull run. So, no one knows what the future holds. But at the end of the day, it's our decision when we bet on sports to, take calculated bets, put our money in strong positions and try and make good decisions based on all the information we've got available. If we know Bitcoin usually goes on these huge runs after a halvening, decent chance it's going to go on a huge run after the next halvening. But what's happening at the moment? People have made a lot of money on Pepe, all these other meme coins. People have made hundreds of % gains in altcoins since early this year. Even if you would have just bought Bitcoin back in January, you would have, got close to doubling your money. Well, if you bought the bottom, which is obviously a very difficult thing to do, but if you did, bottom to top, you would have doubled your money, 100% gain. So at the moment, you go online, everyone's saying Pepe's a scam, meme coin season's over, crypto's tanking, the US government are trying to kill it. Same old shit we've always heard, right? You have these huge booms where people make a lot of money, and then these fast, violent crashes where everyone gets wrecked. And this is a cycle that plays out over and over and over again. And what happens when you get hurt? What happens when you take a beating? What happens when something bad happens to you that doesn't feel very nice, right? What happens if you go to a restaurant, you get food poisoning? You don't want to eat in that restaurant again. What happens if you walk down the street and get robbed? You don't want to walk down that street again. What happens if you get into a car accident? You don't want to drive the car again. This is a big problem with crypto, because what happens if you have these huge booms where people make a lot of money, but the majority of people arrive late at the end of the party and they get wrecked. If you were to come in January, I mean, look at this. Nasty dips this week, right? But if you were to come in January, you would have doubled your money. It'd only be down a little bit. Look at this, is barely a scratch in the bigger picture when we zoom out. But right now you go on Twitter, you go online, it's death and destruction. So I'm just bringing this up just to pay attention. Because what's going to happen now is Bitcoin might dip. Bitcoin may rocket the new highs. Altcoins might continue to get decimated. I don't know what the future is going to hold. I actually think it's quite likely that Bitcoin continues to dip down to this level here at 25k. You can see this is the next area of support. You got a top here, a top here. So I actually think crypto will continue to come down. And if crypto comes down more, down to this 25k, there'll be exchange fed. There'll be stuff saying Binance is going to go bankrupt. The UK government is going to regulate Bitcoin out of existence. Blah, blah, blah. All this shit you hear all the time. And that's going to scare people off. That's going to get people to forget about crypto. That's going to get people to think about crypto being dead. And they're going to take their eye off the ball and go back to other things. And what will happen? Same thing that always happens. Slowly it will come back to life. Slowly it will start grinding back up. And then you'll get the monster bull run after the halvening. So all I will say is pay attention. Because in the last few weeks, or the last couple months, we've been given a clue as to what would happen. In 2 months, you could have doubled your money on Bitcoin. You look at something like Pepe. We've been given clues. If you think Pepe is done, if you think Pepe is finished, if you think Pepe is dead, you're a crazy person. Look at this. You buy Pepe on the breakout, that's a 12x gain. You can't get that bet in the UFC. You can't 12x your money in a week betting on the UFC. I mean, maybe if you hit a crazy parlay, but you guys know what I'm saying, right? So we've been given a clue as to what happens when crypto runs big. Pay attention to Pepe, because it's not over. Still got a 600 million market cap. People are passionate about it now. People are flying the flag for Pepe. It's not going anywhere. It's going to come down. It's going to cool off. People got wrecked. They bought the top. But it will have its day again. But I guarantee what will happen to most people is the next time Pepe rallies and flies 1,000%, the next time it 10x's in a week, which can happen, right? The market cap of SHIB, 6 billion. Market cap of Pepe, currently 600 million. If Pepe reached the level SHIB is at right now, that's a 10x in market cap. Not fucking rocket science, right? Keep an eye on things like this. I'm not saying go out and buy it, Because at the end of the day, Pepe can come all the way back down and do a full retrace easily. All I'm saying is, we know you get a monster bull run after a halvening. If we're 1 year away from the next halvening, pay close attention to things like Pepe. Pay very, very close attention. Because if it's run big once, it will run again. It will run again. And what you don't want to do is what a lot of people have done this time, and buy into Pepe when everyone's talking about it. You want to be buying Pepe down here. This is not an I told you so video at all. This is just to pay attention to what's happening. Because, I'll say again, in the VIP chat room, 3 weeks ago, I was talking about Wojak. And we bought Wojak in this area here. We bought Wojak here, guys. And from there, it did 7x on the breakout. Even if you would have bought Wojak here and rode it all the way down, you would still be up 35%-ish. So all I'm saying is pay attention. Because it is not the end, man. Crypto will bounce back like it always does. The problem is people always arrive when crypto is pumping and booming. Now is not now is the time to pay attention. When shit's going down, when there's blood in the streets, while everyone's saying crypto's dead, we know there is a fucking halvening 1 year from now. Just pay attention. That's all I want to say. That is all I want to say. I thought we'd spend a little bit of time talking about this because I do care about people watching this, and like I say, I'm not a financial advisor. No one knows what the future is going to hold. Maybe crypto goes to zero. But I think it's worth paying attention to everything that's happening at the moment. Because if the past is anything to go by, the next 2 years could present a great opportunity. And that's all it is, man. That is all it is. So, let's get into the fights now, which is why you're all here. Let's start off by breaking down the main event. Jairzinho Rozenstruik against Jailton Almeida. And I guess the reason why I wanted to talk a bit about some other stuff this week is because, let's be real, this isn't the most interesting main event to talk about. It's not the most interesting main card to talk about. So we've got a bit of extra time. We may as well use it to talk about other things, because we know when we've got deeper, more interesting, more complex fights to break down, you know, we can't be spending 20 minutes talking about frog tokens. But as it happens, it is still a fight that we must talk about, so let's get into it. So we can see that Jailton Almeida, one of the biggest, in fact he is the biggest favourite on the card, at average odds of around 1.18, which is minus 556 for an implied probability of 85%. We take a look at the odds on Jairzinho Rozenstruik. He's around an average of 4.90, which is going to be plus 390 for an implied probability of 20%. So, let's not beat around the bush. I guess let's just make this as quick as possible. This is a pointless fight, and I wish I could talk to Dana and ask him why they put on fights like this, like what they feel is the what they feel is the purpose of fights like this. I just don't understand. I just don't understand what their goal is with matchups like this, because it's just a stupid fight that just doesn't make much sense to me at all. We know that Jairzinho Rozenstruik has absolutely no takedown defense and absolutely no ground game at all. And at 35 years old, you know, after 17 pro fights, if he hasn't developed takedown defense and a ground game by now, it's probably never going to happen, right? I don't see Rozenstruik suddenly showing up this weekend with amazing defensive wrestling and a really good ability to work his way back up to his feet if he does get taken down. It's just, he's never going to have it, man. And it's probably the fact that he does look quite weak in the lower body. He does have quite skinny legs. He's quite top heavy. That's probably why grapplers find it so easy to upset his balance. But if you look at Jailton Almeida, Not only does he have big power, not only is he fast and crazy athletic, and is a reasonably good striker, but we know he's an excellent grappler. Really good offensive wrestling, heavy top game, good grappling control, nasty submission game. It's just, this is a really pointless fight in my opinion, because Almeida should be able to grab a hold of Rozenstruik, drag him to the ground and maul him. Maybe Rozenstruik catches him with a big shot on the feet and knocks him out, but outside of that, he's just going to get absolutely ragdolled. And I don't understand the point of this fight. It's just, like, who is this fight for? Like, who's going to be entertained by this? Like, it's not for Rozenstruik, because he's going to get absolutely mauled 9 times out of 10. It's not really for Almeida, because, alright, it's his first main event. You're trying to boost him, right? You're trying to give him another win and help him, climb the ranks into that title picture. But if he just kind of takes Rozenstruik down and just beats him up for a couple of minutes and gets stoppage, like, does that really get people excited in Jailton Almeida? Yeah, it's a weird one for me. Are the fans going to benefit from this fight? Is anyone really going to enjoy Almeida, dumping Rozenstruik on his head and laying on top of him and grounding and pounding him out? I don't know, man. It's just a very strange fight. UFC's in a weird place at the moment with main events like this. I don't get it. It's just it's a strange fight. It is a strange fight. Rozenstruik has a puncher's chance. That's about it. He does hit hard. He is fast. Maybe he catches Almeida with something big and knocks him out. But very hard to knock someone out when you're on your back. And if Almeida does use a grappling heavy game plan, should be an easy night's work. You all know this. You don't need me to say that. So if we look at the over-under on this matchup, I'd be amazed if this fight went to a decision. I just don't see it. I don't see how at some point the fight doesn't go to the ground. And I don't see how at some point when that happens, Rozenstruik doesn't get finished. Obviously the odds reflect that. They're absolutely terrible. Yeah, man, I think the over-under on that fight is a bit dead. From a prop bet point of view, if we look at Almeida's record, we can see that he does like a submission. So obviously when you take someone down, you got 2 options, right? Get a finish via ground and pound, or get a submission. As we can see, the vast majority of the time, Almeida looks for submissions. Won by ground and pound his last fight, but outside of that, he likes to go for submissions. So, problem is, if you look at the odds on Almeida to win by submission, they're very, very bad. So you can't really bet that. The odds are dreadful. This fight is a bit dead from a betting point of view. Even Almeida inside the distance is crazy odds. So yeah, bit of a dead main event for betting. Not a lot you can do. But the good news is the co-main event between Anthony Smith and Johnny Walker is far more interesting. And my computer keeps bleeping at me because Telegram's open. So we'll turn that off. Apologies. So yeah, now let's break down an interesting fight in the co-main event between Anthony Smith and Johnny Walker. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds, we can see that both guys are in the even money odds range. So if you shop around, you can bet both guys odds are about 1.91, which is minus 110, for an implied probability of 52%. So Anthony Smith, 34 years old, 6'4" with a 76-inch reach, and Johnny Walker, 31 years old, 6'6" with an 82-inch reach. So we can see that Johnny Walker has got quite a significant 6-inch reach advantage. And also remember that Anthony Smith has previously fought at middleweight. So he's going to be on the smaller end of the scale for light heavyweight. Whereas Walker at 6'6" with an 82-inch reach could easily fight in the heavyweight division. So this is a small light heavyweight versus an absolutely gigantic light heavyweight, which does give Walker an edge because he's a lot more powerful, a lot more physically imposing than Anthony Smith, which can help him close the skill gap in grappling positions. And obviously he's a lot more dangerous on the feet than Anthony Smith. So when you look at how both these two match up from a stylistic point of view, in some ways it is a tricky fight to read, because I feel Johnny Walker is one of these guys that is making exponential improvements from fight to fight. He's one of these guys that under John Kavanagh at SBG has really started to develop into quite an intelligent and quite a complete mixed martial artist. Back when Johnny Walker first signed for the UFC, and people were calling for him to get a title shot and all this stuff when he was killing everyone in 30 seconds. I was like, slow down a minute, man. Like, if you look at, you can go back watch my breakdown videos of Johnny Walker's first few fights in the UFC, and I was like, slow down. If you watch this guy outside of the UFC, he's very, very low level. His cardio was bad, striking was very sloppy past round 1, his grappling was non-existent. Whereas when you look at him now, he's a very complete fighter. Walker went through this kind of transitional period in his career where, you know, he went from coming out and killing everyone in 20 seconds to then realizing that that's an unsustainable style of fighting, because as he starts to face these tougher guys in the UFC, they're going to be able to weather that early storm, hang in there with him, drag him into deep waters when he's tired, doesn't have the energy to kill him anymore, and you know, he realised he needed to adjust and adapt and pace himself better and develop a more well-rounded skill set, because he wouldn't be able to knock everyone out in 30 seconds. And we've really seen him do that at SPG. We saw the patient performance against Thiago Santos. We saw, you know, decent grappling in his fight against Ion Cutelaba. We saw patience and accuracy in his fight against Paul Craig. So Johnny Walker is someone who's making big improvements from fight to fight, whereas I do feel Anthony Smith is on the opposite end of that career trajectory. I do feel Anthony Smith's on a decline. At 34 years old, he's going to be 35 in July, but at 34, 35 years old, he's not particularly old for a light heavyweight. You know, he's one of these guys that, you know, 34, 35 should have a good few more years left in him in the light heavyweight division. But again, I always use the analogy about miles on the clock. I use the example of cars, right? If you've got a 1-year-old car with 200,000 miles on the clock, or you've got a 10-year-old car with 1,000 miles on the clock, the 10-year-old car, even though it's a lot older, it's probably going to be a lot more reliable than the 1-year-old car, because the components haven't had as much mileage put on them. You know, they haven't been worn down as much. And the same really applies here. Even though Smith is quite young for a light heavyweight, he's had tons of fights, you know, over 50 pro fights. He's taken tons of damage in his career. He had his teeth knocked out against Glover. He's been knocked out a bunch of times, wobbled a bunch of times, a lot of injuries, and that'll start to take his toll. And I do think we're seeing a big decline in Anthony Smith. So we've seen, you know, you've got two guys here on opposite ends of the career trajectory. Walker's making big improvements from fight to fight, whereas I feel Smith very much declining. And straight away, with the size, the reach, the career trajectories both these guys are in, before we even consider how they match up from a stylistic point of view, I start to lean towards Walker. Now, one more thing that I want to show you before we get into talking about how their striking and grappling matches up is where Smith may be at in his career, both physically and mentally. Now, this is a difficult thing to quantify, a difficult thing to talk about, so I'm going to show you video footage instead, because you can see it visually and it'll be a lot easier to understand the point I'm trying to make. But basically, I'm just not sure if Smith has that fire, that aggression, that athleticism, that physicality to compete with the very best light heavyweights in the world anymore. And I just feel he's on a very, very steep decline. Very steep decline. And I'll show you a little bit of footage to try and illustrate my point. Now, we all know Magomed Ankalaev, one of the best light heavyweights in the world. Might even be the best light heavyweight in the world. But there was alarming body language in the second round of Anthony Smith's last fight, which made me really question where Smith is at in his career mentally. So this is the start of round 2, and what we can see here is Smith close the distance and shoot a takedown. So you can see him driving Ankalaev into the cage here. A very slow laboured takedown attempt. But obviously Ankalaev, high-level combat sambo practitioner, amazing takedown defense, very difficult to take down and hold down. So Smith is eventually going to realise he's not going to be able to take Ankalaev down, and then just immediately retreats and shows very, very submissive body language. The kind of submissive body language that you don't see at any level of MMA. You know, I watch hundreds and hundreds of hours of MMA, maybe even thousands of MMA every year, and I never see stuff like this. So once Smith realizes he's not going to get the takedown here, he just kind of tries to pull guard. And you can see that in that moment where he struggled on the feet in round 1, he hasn't been able to get the takedown in round 2. He's just kind of conceded here that he can't beat Ankalaev. And so he kind of just rolls over and plays dead. He goes for damage limitation, he goes into defensive shell, and he just tries to pull Ankalaev on top of him. Like I say, I watch hundreds of hours of MMA every year, maybe even thousands of hours, all different levels. You know, every single promotion you can think of, top to bottom, right? All varying skill levels. You never see body language like this from a fighter. You never see a fighter behave like this in the octagon. It's very bizarre, and it's not the first time we've seen things like this from Anthony Smith. And this is the guy that's facing a young, hungry, aggressive bull like Johnny Walker, who's making big improvements from fight to fight, who's very strong, very physically imposing, has dreams of being a world champion. And I just think these guys are at very, very different places in their career. So I'm showing you this because it's one thing for me to say, you know, I think Smith has lost the fire, you know, the motivation. I don't think he can compete with the best light heavyweights in the world anymore. It's easy for me to say that in a breakdown video. It's a lot different when you see it here with your own eyes for you to appreciate the extent of the point that I'm trying to make. And you can see he just kind of turtles up, doesn't really make much of an effort to fight through it, just turns his back, you know, and just basically is waiting for the ref to stop the fight here. You know, just very, very submissive, just wanting the ref to stop the fight, not really making any effort to work out of this position. And it's over. And it's a shame to see, but I think it's quite clear that as soon as Smith realised he had nothing for Ankalaev, he looked for a way out. And that's very concerning for me, because we know Johnny Walker is very dangerous. If he hurts Smith in this fight, which he's quite likely to do with how much power he's got in his hands, how devastating his kicking game is, Smith's probably going to roll over and play dead. Probably not going to be that difficult to get him out of there. So I do like Johnny Walker in this fight. I do lean towards him. I'm very, very tempted to bet him. Haven't bet him yet, but I'm very, very tempted to do so. I'm going to give it a little bit more thought, but I think Walker gets the job done. In terms of how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, from a technical point of view, you could maybe say Anthony Smith is the better grappler. However, the issue with Smith is that he's very weak off his back and really lacks physicality on the ground. So he's alright when he's in top position, but if you put him on his back, he struggles very bad. And this is where size and physicality comes into it. At 6'6" with an 82-inch reach, Walker is going to be very physically imposing on the ground. So any slight technical advantages Smith has on the ground can be negated by the power, the athleticism, the physicality of Walker. So very likely that if these two start to grapple, Walker will just overwhelm him and overpower him. So I'm not particularly concerned about Anthony Smith's grappling in this fight. And when it comes to striking, Anthony Smith is, you know, he's very slow, which is a big issue when you're facing someone like Johnny Walker that can cover distance so quickly and deliver knockout power with pretty much any limb on his body, flying knees, spinning elbows, any kick you want, any punch you want. He's extremely dangerous. So where Smith is quite slow, doesn't move his head that much, doesn't land the most damaging, impactful shots, you know, Walker's very good at being all the way outside a range where he can be hit and using his length and using his power to put his opponents in a defensive shell and stop them from coming forward. I just think this is one of those fights where, you know, I don't see many paths to victory for Smith. Could he knock Walker out? Maybe. Pretty unlikely though. You know, Smith's not the most dangerous on the feet. Not easy to get inside on someone as long and tall as Walker, especially when he's a lot faster than you. His footwork is a lot better. Could Smith out grapple Walker? I mean, you saw it in that Magomedov clip, Magomed Ankalaev clip, how slow and stiff Anthony Smith's offensive wrestling was, and how weak he then looked on his back. So, man, I think Walker gets it done this weekend. I think this is going to be a passing of the guard fight where Walker takes another step towards the title picture. You know, I think this will be another example of where we see Father Time is undefeated. and I think Father Time's going to hit Anthony Smith pretty hard this weekend. Could be wrong, but I think it's a pretty bad stylistic matchup for Smith. So in terms of whether or not this fight will go to a decision, I do think it's very likely it doesn't go to a decision because of how dangerous Walker is, how slow and bad defensively Smith is. However, the odds are absolutely terrible on that, so you can't bet that. What I would say is, if you're one of these people that likes to gamble and place bets on every fight to make watching the fights more entertaining, I don't totally hate fight goes to a decision. Hear me out. I know initially that sounds crazy, but hear me out. The reason why I don't totally hate fight goes to a decision is because Johnny Walker has shown a much more patient approach to fighting in recent years. So when you see odds like this, that's the odds makers, you know, looking at Johnny Walker's crazy first round finishes where he, you know, KOs guys with flying knees and spinning shit, and assuming that, you know, there's going to be a crazy knockdown drag out war where someone gets finished quickly, which it might be. It absolutely might be. You know, that's pretty much how Walker's fight against Ion Cutelaba and Paul Craig went. However, we have seen a much more patient Johnny Walker in recent years, and if Walker really respects Anthony Smith and the threats that he brings to the table, and Smith really respects Johnny Walker's power, you could see a little bit of a standoff here where neither guy wants to get overly aggressive for fear of getting themselves in trouble, and instead we end up with like a tentative cagey chess match like we got you know, in the Thiago Santos Johnny Walker fight where it went to a decision. It's not the most likely outcome here. I do think it's more likely this fight ends inside the distance, but you gotta let the odds do the work for you. If you really want to bet the over-under on this fight, obviously the over gives you the better risk to reward ratio, a big underdog odds. So it's just something for you to think about. Things aren't always what they seem in MMA, right? We're not always going to get, you know, the crazy version of Walker that swings for the fences, tries to kill everyone in 30 seconds. And Smith's an experienced veteran that's quite tough, man. He's you know, he's also gone deep in fights quite frequently, actually. So, in terms of prop bets, I'm going to completely contradict myself now by saying I think the most likely outcome is Walker by knockout or TKO, but the odds are very bad on that. So that's not something that I would be betting personally. Outside of that, there's no real props I'm that interested in, so I would give them a pass. Now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be Daniel Rodriguez against Ian Mercado Gary. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Gary is the favourite at average odds of about 1.33, which is minus 303 for an implied probability of 75%. If we take a look at the odds on Rodriguez, he's around an average of 3.40, which is plus 240 for an implied probability of 29%. So Rodriguez is 36 years old, 6'1" with a 74-inch reach, and Gary is 25 years old, 6'3" with a 74-inch reach. You can see both guys roughly the same size. Big difference in age though. We can see that Rodriguez is 11 years older than Gary, which statistically means the younger fighter wins around 70% of the time, which is very interesting. If we pop Gary's odds back into the implied probability calculator, we can see that they are an implied probability of 75%, which is in the ballpark of where the age difference in this gives him the probability of winning. And from a stylistic matchup as well, I think this is a really good fight for Ian Gary. I am low-key very high on Ian Gary. I think for 25 years old, he's absolutely brilliant. Gary is one of these guys that for the longest time I was very much unsure on, and if you go back and watch my previous breakdown videos of Gary, you know, you'll probably see me, you know, I don't know what I've said about him in the past, but I can only imagine I would have been very much on the fence with him, and saying things along the lines of, you know, he does look very good, but he hasn't really been tested yet. And I feel he was tested in his last fight against Keenan Song, and I feel he came through, passed the test with absolute flying colours. I was so impressed by Ian Gary, because when I look at a guy like Gary that has had a good career in Cage Warriors, you know, he's been winning fights relatively comfortable in the UFC, you know, I always ask myself, how is he going to look when he first starts to face some resistance? Because it's all well and good, you know, being very technical, you know, having good grappling, high level striking, and being able to dance around these guys and outclass them that, you know, aren't on your level striking, so they can't get near you, they can't get inside, they can't deal with your footwork and movement, and they're not, you know, skilled enough grapplers to take you down and put you in bad positions on the ground. So when I see a guy like Gary, they do look amazing, but I always question, are they going to be able to dance around the higher level guys? Are they going to be able to, you know, pace themselves and still look good deep in fights when they're forced to work hard and exert a lot of energy? Are they going to be able to show enough dog to bounce back and recover after being put in a bad position or get really badly hurt in a fight? Those are all the questions I have over a guy like Gary, but I feel like we don't have all the answers when it comes to Gary yet, but I feel the Keenan Song fight was a huge milestone in Gary's career, where he showed us he's got something. Because obviously early in the Song fight, he was hurt very, very bad, rocked very, very bad. And for a young, inexperienced 25-year-old fighter with only 11 pro fights to get hurt that bad in the UFC for the first time ever and show that much composure to weather the storm, get his head back in the game, and then get right back to his game plan and strategy and continue to go on and outclass Keenan Song. I just think it speaks absolute volumes, and I think he's brilliant, and I think he's going to have a good career, and that is a huge positive sign for me. And I think he gives Daniel Rodriguez absolute hell this weekend, if I'm honest. I think Gary absolutely deserves to be a big favourite, and I think this will just be another fight where people start to understand you may have something a little bit special with Ian Gary. He's just very good everywhere, doesn't really have any weaknesses. Grappling seems pretty good, you know, still, you know, kind of untested in that area, but the way he moves when he's on the ground, the way he carries himself on the ground, you can tell he knows what he's doing. Even though he hasn't faced a high level grappler in the UFC yet, you can just fucking, I watch hundreds of hours of UFC every year. You can just fucking tell Gary knows what he's doing on the ground. His footwork is good, his movement is good, his striking very technical, defensively he's excellent, he's tough, right? Look at the trouble he found himself in his last fight. I think Gary's very good. And the problem with this fight for Daniel Rodriguez is that this is a mixed martial arts contest, right? The clue is in the name, mixed martial arts, meaning there's a mixture of things in there. Daniel Rodriguez's problem in this fight is that he's way too one-dimensional. He's a one-dimensional southpaw boxer, doesn't do a whole lot else. Takedown offense isn't great. He's very weak off his back, doesn't throw many kicks, pretty much just wants to win a boxing match. And I just think that is way too limited of a skill set to cause someone like Gary a problem, who has shown flashes of good grappling, who does have good footwork, does have good movement, does throw a much more diverse range of strikes than Rodriguez. I think this is a good stylistic matchup for Gary. And what I really like about this fight for Gary is that Rodriguez isn't particularly dangerous on the feet. Sure, like every fighter at the highest level of the sport, he does have the odd knockout here and there. He knocked out Dwight Grant, he knocked out Preston Parsons, but for the most part, Daniel Rodriguez is a volume striker. Doesn't really have much power in his hands. And so this is a really good fight for Gary to showcase his high-level technical striking without too much risk of being knocked out, without too much risk of, you know, getting caught with a big shot, because he's not really facing a big power puncher. I think Gary outclasses Rodriguez this weekend and shows a real gulf in the level that separates these two. I just think Gary's going to be too much, and I think he's going to develop into a top welterweight in the UFC. And let's not get carried away. You know, he could fight a tough combat Sambo guy in his next fight, get absolutely ragdolled, but he's 25 years old. He's got time on his side. Who fucking cares if he gets ragdolled in his next one, knocked out in the one after that? It doesn't matter. He's got time on his side, and for 25 years old, he's absolutely brilliant, and I think he's going to do well this weekend. So good luck to Mr. Gary. Unfortunately, we can't bet this fight because his odds reflect his advantages in this matchup. Too steep of a favourite for me. Very little risk to reward ratio to betting someone in that odds range. But doesn't change the fact I think he does rather well this weekend. to the extent where I don't really know if his dog will pass. I'm not that interested in Rodriguez. In terms of whether the fight goes to a decision or not, I do think it is very likely that it will go to a decision. Both guys have proven they're very tough and they're very durable. If you look at Gary's record, as he has started to face a higher level of opponent, more of his fights have gone to a decision. So you can see earlier in his career, fighting lower level guys, he's getting the finishes. Starts to face a step up in competition. Starts to see fights go longer, to the extent that, you know, even his last fight almost went the distance, which would have meant that 4 of his last 5 would have gone to a decision. Similar story really with Rodriguez. Plenty of his recent fights have gone to a decision as well. So I'll probably be betting the over this weekend. I do think it's quite likely this fight goes to a decision, and yeah, hopefully that is a winner, because I'm almost certainly going to be betting this myself. In terms of the props on this one, Gary by decision is all I'm really interested in, but the odds, again, really steep, not that interesting to me, and I would definitely not put my money in that much danger betting on a highly specific outcome for such a little reward. So that one is an easy pass, but I do like the over on that fight quite a lot. Now let's take a look at the next fight. Let's break down the matchup between Ihor, probably butchering it, Peteria, definitely butchering that. Very much apologise. I know I get people in the comments every week like, it's not pronounced like that, his name is pronounced like this instead. I'm really sorry. I know it's very disrespectful. My accent is probably not the best at producing some surnames, so I'm sorry, Mr. Duelist, if I butcher your name. But I very much enjoy watching you fight, and I hope you do well this weekend, so please don't kill me. He is facing Carlos Ulberg, the Black Jag. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, where have they gone? We can see that Ulberg is a pretty big favourite at average odds of around 1.24, which is going to be minus 417 for an implied probability of 81%. If we take a look at the odds on Peteria, he is around an average of 4.40, which is going to be plus 140 for plus 340 for an implied probability of 23%. So Peteria is 26 years old, 6'3", with a 75-inch reach. Ulberg, 32 years old, 6'4", with a 77-inch reach. And that means both guys are roughly the same size. However, you can see Ulberg is quite a bit older than Ulberg. He's going to be 6 years older, but in the context of this fight, it doesn't really mean very much, because Ulberg, in contrast to Peteria, is quite inexperienced when it comes to MMA, although he's probably got, you know, a bunch of kickboxing fights which make up for his lack of MMA. So Ulberg, one of many big favourites on this card, and I do think it is likely to be an easy night's work for him. Ulberg's start to the UFC wasn't the smoothest, ran into some trouble gassing out against Kennedy and Chukwu, but since then, in a very similar way to Johnny Walker really, has adapted, adjusted, learnt from that loss, and made significant improvements. And we now see Ulberg looking significantly better every time we see him. He now does a really good job of pacing himself. He's patient, he's technical, he's athletic. It's just very, very good. Peteria, on the other hand, is raw, he's aggressive, he's explosive, he's wild, but there's not a lot of technique behind his raw power and aggression. So grappling very low level, striking is pretty sloppy, and Peteria is also one of these guys that slows down a lot as fights wear on. So whereas Ulberg has found how to pace himself and not burn himself out, you know, really bad in round 1, Peteria hasn't really learned how to pace himself yet. He comes out the gate super hard, super aggressive, and then burns himself out and is nowhere near as effective in the second and third round. So, you know, neither of these guys are grapplers. You know, Peteria very low level on the ground. Ulberg's a kickboxer. I wouldn't expect this fight to go to the ground. You know, if it did, it's tough to say who's got the advantage there, because in Peteria's past fights, he's looked very bad on the ground, and we really haven't seen much of Ulberg's grappling at all because there's just no footage available on it, so don't really know how these two match up on the ground. When it comes to striking, to be fair, I would imagine Peteria does alright early, because he's so aggressive and so dangerous, Ulberg will show him respect in the early stages of the fight. I'm not saying they can't get into a big exchange and Ulberg couldn't knock him out. It might happen, especially with how bad defensively and reckless Peteria is. But I do think Ulberg will start slow and patiently and give himself time to get comfortable in there. Give himself time to get a read on Peteria. Let Peteria tire himself out a little bit. And then I think you'll see Ulberg, start to take over and do a lot better in the second and third round. But the thing with a guy like Peteria is they are so aggressive early and they are so dangerous. You've got to be very careful with them early. I think Ulberg is smart enough to know that. He'll know that Peteria is going to be looking to try and take him out in round one. And, he's not going to want to put himself in any unnecessary danger when he knows this guy becomes far easier to beat in the second and third round when he slows down and becomes sloppier. So, good fight for Carlos Ulberg. I think he gets it done. And, should be a pretty easy night's work for Ulberg. I think if he can just make it out of round one, I think Peteria is going to find it very hard in the second and third. So, in terms of the over-under, it's very tricky for me, actually. Tricky. Obviously, the fight does or does not go the distance is off the table. Do think it's very likely to end inside the distance with how tired Peteria gets, but the odds are terrible on that, so can't bet that. So then we turn our attention to the over or under 1.5 rounds. This is very, very difficult for me to figure out. I don't really have a strong opinion on it because I could see it ending in round one with how dangerous both guys are. If they get into a big exchange, someone gets caught with something. But I could also see a slow start where they both pace themselves and are patient and don't want to get into any big exchanges because they respect how dangerous each other is. But with how much Peteria slows, it is more likely that the fight lasts less than 1.5 rounds. But it's not something I'm going to be betting because I don't have a super strong feeling on it. And I like the over on the Gary Rodriguez fight a lot. And so I wouldn't want to risk any potential profits on this, rolling the dice on something a lot riskier like this. So I'm going to give that a pass as well. So I hope you found that useful. Now let's break down the final fight on the main card, which is going to be Alex Morono against Tim the Dirty Bird Means. Oh, shit. Is he still called the Dirty Bird? He is. I was like, oh, maybe he's changed his nickname as some fighters do. He's still the Dirty. Okay, let's take a look at the odds on this one. So we can see that Alex Morono is a reasonably big favourite. The odds of 1.44, which is minus 227 for an implied probability of 69%. If we look at the odds on Tim Means, he's around an average of 2.80, which is plus 180 for an implied probability of 36%. So Morono, 32 years old, 5'11" with a 72-inch reach. Tim Means, 39 years old, 6'2" with a 75-inch reach. So you can see a bit of a size and reach advantage there for Tim Means. Alex Morono is very, very small for the welterweight division. So he's used to being smaller than his opponents, so it shouldn't faze him too much. Although Means, of course, is very long and tall. The other big talking point in this fight, or the other big X factor to consider, is obviously Tim Means' age. At 39 years old, he is on a steep decline. We've seen him decline a lot in recent years. Can't take a shot like he used to. Very fragile, very injury prone, and Father Time is undefeated. So Alex Morono is 7 years younger. 7% chance of winning. However, this is at the kind of sweet spot for the age statistics where they are their most meaningful. Because at 32 years old, Alex Morono is in his prime for a welterweight. He's at his absolute best. Whereas Tim Means, at 39 years old, is going to be declining from fight to fight. So this is the stage in their careers. Sorry, it's gone blurry. Try and correct this. They're at that stage in their careers where the age stats, very, very meaningful. They give Morono a big edge coming into the fight this weekend. Which is interesting because I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it right now. I do think Tim Means is significantly better than Alex Morono everywhere. He is levels and levels and levels and levels above Morono on the ground. We know Morono's biggest weakness has always been the fact that his takedown defense is non-existent. He's very weak off his back. Tim Means is predominantly a striker, but he's actually a very good MMA grappler to go with it. Good offensive wrestling, heavy top game, decent grappling control. Means is going to have a huge advantage on the ground. On the feet, he's also a lot better than Morono. Throws a more diverse range of attacks. He's more technical. You know, he's just, you know, Tim Means is an elite striker, whichever way you dress it up. Whereas Morono likes to kind of bounce around. He's got an awkward, you know, goofy style. Doesn't throw a particularly diverse range of strikes. Not particularly dangerous on the feet. But, you know, Means is just a much better striker. Unfortunately, and I say this every week, if making money from betting MMA was as simple as identifying who the more skilled fighter is, then we'd all be very wealthy, because it is very easy to do that. I'd be an absolute gajillionaire if all I had to do was watch footage of two fighters and bet on the guy who was the more skilled fighter. It is such an easy thing to do. You can identify that very, very easily. As we know, there's so much more that goes into determining the outcome of an MMA fight. And this is a really good example, because this is one of those fights where Tim Means is a lot better than Morono everywhere. Like, it isn't even close. But can't bet on Tim Means because of how fragile he is at this stage of his career, how much he's declined in recent years. So while Alex Morono, from a technical point of view, is far inferior to Tim Means, his chin is still, you know, in a much better place than Tim Means is. I'm not going to say his chin's amazing, because he was knocked out by Santiago Ponzinibbio in his last fight, but he's obviously a lot more durable. The Means he's not going to be dealing with as many long-term, you know, chronic recurring injuries. Can take a shot better. He's going to be a lot hungrier, a lot more motivated, a lot more durable, a lot more trustworthy. So this is one of those fights where, even though I can kind of identify that Means is, you know, a lot better than Morono everywhere, and if both guys show up and perform to their full potential, Means is probably going to win. I'm also not dumb enough to bet against a trend as strong as the younger fighter in matchups like this winning a huge percentage of the time. You know, I feel betting against trends like this is like trying to push a boulder up a mountain. You are betting against a strong trend, and, you know, it's a lot easier to push a boulder down a mountain. It's a lot easier to bet with a strong trend than against it. Means might be that 1 in 3 exception to the rule that, you know, dodges Father Time and gets a win, but it is very rare that guys in their late 30s beat guys in their prime in the welterweight division. Very rare. And so even though Means is a lot better than Morono everywhere, in my opinion, I still feel Morono probably finds a way to get it done. You know, kind of similar read to Morono's last fight. From a technical point of view, Santiago Ponzinibbio was better than Morono everywhere, right? And even though Ponzinibbio won, I think we can all agree that, you know, it was a bit of a lucky win. Morono was cruising right up until the knockout, right? The knockout came out of nowhere, and he was a couple of minutes away from winning a decision. The point being, guys in their late 30s usually struggle against guys in their early 30s, and so I'm not interested in betting this fight. So, from an over-under point of view, I don't think this fight's going to go to a decision. The reason being, well, the reason why I don't think this fight is going to go to a decision is because before Morono's last fight, he was quite open about not caring about his career, not caring about being a UFC champion, accepting the fact he would never be UFC champion, and instead he said he just wanted to put on exciting fights. He wants the fight of the night, the knockout of the night. He wants the 50 G's, baby. And so in the Ponzinibbio fight, you saw Morono swing for the fences. You saw him baiting Ponzinibbio into big exchanges, and he rocked, wobbled, dropped Ponzinibbio at least 2 or 3 times in that fight. It was wild. But obviously, when you put yourself in a position to finish your opponent, you're also putting yourself in a position to be finished. And that is exactly what happened, because he got into a crazy exchange late on and got knocked out. So if he takes the same approach to this fight and tries to bait Means into these big exchanges, very likely someone's going to get knocked out, because Tim Means is fragile at this stage in his career. He can't take a shot anymore. And Morono is very reckless, loves to get into big exchanges, and we know Means is dangerous enough to punish him and knock him out like Ponzinibbio did if he gets overly aggressive. So I'll probably bet on this fight not to go to a decision. I do quite like that. And yeah, you know, there's 2 over-unders on this card, which I think are pretty decent. Now, in terms of the prop bets on this one, Morono by knockout or TKO is the most likely. I don't love the odds, but you know, I do think that's the most likely outcome. So if you really want to bet a prop on this to make watching the fight more interesting, that's the one I would go for. Hope you found that useful. So that is going to be it for this week's YouTube video. I hope you found it useful. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button below and subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my website, MMABettingTips.com. Loads of fun over there. You'll absolutely love it. Take care, everyone. Till next time, when we have a breakdown video for next week's card. Have a great week. Have a great night. Hope you make loads of money this weekend. I'll be back very soon. So have a great week, guys. Take care. Bye.